Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. I am back on Tag Tuesday with a tag video. So this is the Cancel Culture tag, which is an original tag by Scott and Nell of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and they tagged me in their original version of this tag. So this is a very interesting tag, and I appreciate being tagged in it. I'm also going to link down below several other versions of this tag I've seen recently that I've really liked, including Mark Nash's version, Roz at Scallydandling About the Books, and Brian at Bookish, who just today also posted a version of this tag. So I'm gonna start with the first question, which is to tag other people. So it says to generate interesting conversation, try to tag at least one channel who you think might have a different opinion to you and one who might have a similar one. So I'm not sure how similar or different to my opinions these other booktubers might be, but in this tag I'm going to tag if they want to do it. Paula at Draw Your Book. I'm going to tag Jim at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. Cousin at Always Doing, and Kevy at Say Kevy. So if y'all want to do this tag, you are tagged. So in Mark Nash's version of this tag, he actually started off by talking about his own personal history with deplatforming, which he said is sort of the older version, the old school version of quote-unquote canceling. And I do have some experience with this subject, and I think it might be useful to sort of preface my discussion of this tag with my own experience with deplatforming. So from 2015 to 2017, I was co-president of a synagogue in Auburn, Alabama. Auburn is where I did my graduate work. And in the last semester of my time at Auburn, so spring of 2017, so I was, you know, getting ready to defend my dissertation and all of that stuff, or maybe I had already defended. I don't remember now. But anyway, it was the semester that I was going to graduate. Richard Spencer, who is a sort of known neo-Nazi agitator, decided he was going to come to Auburn's campus to speak. And, you know, again, I was co-president of the synagogue at that time, and Auburn's Jewish community, as is you can probably imagine, quite small, and everybody basically freaked out, right? Because we didn't know what exactly was going to happen. And so first, the university told him that he couldn't come, and we all kind of just breathed a collective sigh of relief and said, okay, great. But then he got some kind of court injunction that said that they had to let him speak on campus for whatever reason. So we were back to panicking again. Because he said something like that Auburn was going to rue the day that they, you know, tried to cancel his talk, and that he was going to bring his own crowd of supporters with him. And so, you know, especially knowing that he espouses these white supremacist and neo-Nazi viewpoints, you know, we weren't sure exactly what was going to happen. We were like, well, I mean, are he and his people going to, like, come try to vandalize the synagogue? Or, you know, they going to try to, like, get people from the audience and, like, beat them up or whatever, like something else that we hadn't even thought of as a possibility. So this was not good. So in consultation with both the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center, both of whom have experience dealing with white supremacists and hate groups and neo-Nazis, etc., etc., we were advised, the synagogue was advised to tell people not to attend Richard Spencer's talk, because even though I feel like a lot of people's knee-jerk response was to go to the talk and try to protest, they actually told us not to do that, because they said that what those kind of people want the most is to be able to have people there to agitate and provoke. So that then when people get provoked and riled up and then, you know, respond or, you know, even sort of lash out in some sort of physical altercation, then they, the neo-Nazis and their supporters, can look like the victims. And that's exactly what they want, because they basically want to be able to say, oh, these other people are trampling on my free speech rights and they're trying to cancel me and blah, blah, blah. And so, so instead, the ADL and the SPLC instead encouraged us to organize, like, alternative events on campus that promoted diversity and inclusion and unity and things like that. So that is what was done. There were a number of other alternative events happening on Auburn's campus at the same time as the Richard Spencer talk. And in the end, it honestly ended up... Oh, and I should also say that we did also talk to the local police department, who agreed to increase their patrols of the neighborhood where the synagogue is located, because, again, you know, we were all kind of nervous and we didn't exactly know what was going to happen. So that was very nice. And so in the end, thankfully, it ended up being kind of much ado about nothing, because he came, he gave his talk. I did not go to it, but I did see some clips of it on YouTube afterward. And let me tell y'all, he's not exactly a rhetorically persuasive individual. He's pretty much just a troll. He's not someone who has really sort of thought out his opinions and is trying to persuade people who don't already agree with him. So he ended up pretty much looking like the fool that he was. And not to mention that he came to Auburn University, which is a very big football school, American football, and he insulted football. Not a smart move. So that gave me a lot more sort of confidence in the free marketplace of ideas in the United States. The fact that, you know, he came and he pretty much looked like an idiot, because he was. And no actual violence broke out at the event. There was one incident that I heard about, but it was non-Auburn people, and it was off campus later. So I was very pleased about that. But I will say that this issue of deplatforming or quote unquote canceling, I do think it definitely depends on like what size of audience base you're talking about and what amount of power that you have, right? Because like my confidence in the free marketplace of ideas, I think, definitely was sort of shaken after the January 6th Capitol riots happened in the United States. So I was very glad that Twitter finally deplatformed Donald Trump after all this time, because a lot of misinformation that he was retweeting and that was swirling around him vanished and like went down by a significant amount just after his Twitter, was shut down and he couldn't use Twitter anymore. So I think in extreme cases like that, especially if you're talking about somebody who has that massive of a base and an audience, and you know, that sort of incident happened, it was definitely a good thing that he was finally deplatformed. But in the case of somebody like Richard Spencer, who, again, you know, was not a persuasive speaker, was not prepared to actually convince people who didn't already agree with him about the subject, I feel like the free marketplace of ideas was still working. But yeah, definitely, like, this year, my confidence in the free marketplace of ideas has been somewhat shaken, not gonna lie. So, okay, so now to get into the actual tag, but I told that story because I appreciated that Mark started out with his own kind of history of deplatforming, and I thought that might be interesting, and it's also related to this tag. So, what is cancel or call out culture? So I feel like these are two different things, and I think most people that I've seen do this tag have explained that they're two different things. So calling somebody out is reaching out to them because they said something that might be construed as offensive, and trying to say, hey, you said this thing and I don't agree with it and you should rethink this or whatever, either publicly or privately. I would say preferably privately. But cancel culture is something that Brian said in his video today, was that cancel culture is often sort of a scare term that's used by conservatives, and I think that's spot on. I think for the most part, I don't know that cancel culture, as people think of it, actually exists. I think it's just a term that is used by people on the far right or people on the conservative side of the political spectrum as a boogeyman. And yeah, and I don't think it's actually real, because as Nell points out in Scott and Nell's original version of this video, no one who actually has a lot of power is ever truly canceled. They might like go sort of underground or silent, or, you know, they don't, you know, they just sort of stay quiet for a while, but like, you know, it's not like they actually were quote unquote canceled, you know? So I don't know that I think cancel culture as a term actually is really a thing that exists. as much as it is a specter of things that people are worried about for one reason or another, and have built up into this thing that it's really not. Because again, as Brian points out in his own version of this tag, there's a difference between canceling somebody, which is somebody who actually has power, versus bullying somebody who doesn't have any power. And those are two different things, and I think that's an important distinction to draw. Number 3, is cancel or call out culture a positive or negative force in the booktube, bookstagram, bookish community as a whole? Why do you think this? So, I have to say, I'm not a big enough booktuber, and I don't think I follow people who are like really, really huge booktubers enough to have become involved in quote unquote canceling in the bookish community. Now I have, you know, seen like call out things happen before, and I think that's fine, and for the most part I think that's been fairly well received. Like if people are discussing something in the comments of a video, or, you know, amongst themselves privately or something like that. So I don't know that I would say it's necessarily positive or negative. So yeah. Number 4, from mixing fabrics to involuntary cannibalism, what transgressions would you boycott an author over? So I'm a very petty person, to be honest. So there are like a myriad of things that I would possibly boycott an author over, you know, including but not limited to overt racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, etc., etc. Again, the list is not limited to those things. Could be for something else too, because I'm petty. So, number 5, what does boycott mean to you? Not buy, not read, not promote, all 3. How do you boycott? Does this depend on the transgression or offense? So, I would say for me, it definitely means not. It definitely means not to buy and not to promote. Maybe it also means not to read. Now, if it's something that I was really interested in reading and I could get it like from the library or something, maybe I would still do that anyway. But that hasn't actually come up yet. So yeah. Oh, I should also add to the previous question, sexual assault allegations. Something else I would boycott an author over, so yes. But yeah, it hasn't really come up, so I'm just going to say yeah, all 3, not buy, not read, not promote. And I don't really think it depends on the transgression or offense for me. So, number 6, what books or authors, if any, that you would have otherwise read do you boycott? So Chimamanda Adichie for her TERF support. So she has sort of publicly supported other people who have been accused of transphobia. And she herself has said some questionable things about trans women, so that's unfortunate because I have liked her books that I've read, but I'm not going to read her, I'm not going to promote any of her work anymore. And then someone else, and this falls into the more sort of like petty side of reasons I would boycott an author, to be honest, but when I was trying to pick out authors for my own Arab American literature project that I'm doing this year, one name that came up is Randa Jarrar, and you know, I thought to myself, I was like, God, that name sounds so familiar. And then I Googled her, and on her Wikipedia page, it talked about her controversial statements about former First Lady Barbara Bush after Barbara Bush's passing. And I was like, ah, yes, that's why I know that name. So basically, on the very day that Barbara Bush died, Randa Jarrar tweeted or made a statement online or something like that about how Barbara Bush was an amazing racist who raised a war criminal. And I just felt like that was tacky and uncalled for. I mean, the woman had just died, you know, and I think like people do need to be held accountable for things that they say and do. But I also feel like the day someone dies, or like, you know, within a couple of days of when they die, is not the appropriate time for that. So, you know, it would have been one thing if she had, you know, said it in a way that was like less severe, like maybe a little bit later after the fact and not the very day that this woman had died. So, yeah, I just thought that was really tacky and uncalled for. So when this project came up, I was like, oh, yep, not reading her. So, again, I'm petty. What can I say? Number 7, when does boycotting a book or author become cancel culture? Are the two even related? No, I don't think those are the same thing at all. I think if you boycott a book or an author, that's an individual personal choice and doesn't have anything to do with quote-unquote cancel culture. So I don't think those two are related. Number 8, how do you think power, money, size of audience, influence, etc. affect who is canceling and being canceled? I think those things do affect who is being quote-unquote canceled, because I don't think that, one choice that an individual person without a relative amount of power makes against someone who does have a relative amount of power constitutes canceling. I think it can only really constitute boycotting or something like that. And then, and if it's somebody who's like, say, a really large booktuber who speaks against a tiny author or something like that, I don't think I would condone that unless the tiny author was like really guilty of like very egregious behavior. Because otherwise it would sort of seem to be a bullying situation. Whereas you could just like ignore them or not promote them and probably get the same effect. Number 9, do you apply the same standards to the booktubers you watch? No, I do not. Because, as Ralph Waldo Emerson says, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. So, no, I do not apply the same standards to all booktubers that I watch. It definitely depends on how much I like you, what our pre-existing relationship is like, if I feel comfortable having a discussion with you about X, Y, and Z, etc., etc. And then the second part of this question is, have you ever called out, confronted, privately messaged, or unsubscribed from somebody over their opinion? Yes, I have talked to people in the past about their opinions, only people that I felt like I could have a reasonable discussion with, and I think that went pretty well, at least from my standpoint. And I have also unsubscribed from people over their opinions of things, and the most recent example of this was during the recent Israeli-Palestinian flare-up. I definitely unsubscribed from and or stopped watching videos from people who just made blatantly anti-Israel statements and comments. I think it's fine for you to be pro-Palestinian. I think you can be pro-Palestinian without being anti-Israel. And then question 10, if cancel culture is a destructive force, a constructive force might be to highlight talented authors and books from communities victimized by anybody you boycott. Please highlight some authors and recommend some books. So, okay, so I have several recommendations here. So, first, I made it a priority to read more books this year by non-binary authors, because that was, I realized, a blind spot for me in my reading. So far, I've read 3 books by non-binary authors this year, and they've all been really good. So I recommend Genderqueer by Maia Kobabe, which is a graphic memoir. I also recommend The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi, which is a novella. And I also recommend Surviving Autocracy by Masha Gessen, that is non-fiction. Some other recommendations, here's some short story recommendations from women of color. The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw, Hope and Other Dangerous Pursuits by Layla Lalami, and The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. Those were all solidly 4-star reads for me. I thought they were all really good. Here's some poetry recommendations. So, Daylight by Roya Marsh was already mentioned by both Mark Nash and Roz, but I agree and wanted to just second and third their recommendation of Roya Marsh's Daylight. The New Black by Evie Shockley, which was the best poetry collection I read in 2019. And Whereas by Lady Long Soldier, which was the best poetry collection I read last year. So, and then my last set of recommendations are all nonfiction, so I could not possibly do a recommendations list without mentioning James Baldwin at least once. So, seriously, read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. Why haven't you read it yet? Also, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. I read that this year. It was absolutely a 5-star read. It was, when I did my mid-year book freakout tag, it was the best nonfiction I had read up to that point. So yeah, New Jim Crow. And then finally, I want to recommend Minor Feelings, An Asian American Reckoning by Cathy Park Hong. This is a book that I think had been in the BookTube Prize for nonfiction. I think it got knocked out after the quarterfinals round, maybe, which I was sad about. But this is a very good book, and I highly recommend it. So, thank you for watching this. If you have thoughts about anything I've said here, I would love to hear that. Please feel free to let me know that in the comments below. Thank you to Scott and Nell for tagging me. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?